How many of you have been using DAX for at least 1 year? 2 years? 3 years? 5 years? 10 years? Now I want to see who lies. Okay. Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're about to talk about time intelligence in DAX and Power BI. So I'll keep the introductory part. Who has never been using time intelligence with DAX? Small number of people. Okay. So I'll keep the introductory part a bit shorter, and then we cover more topics. The good thing about this session is that I'm going to show you a couple of slides, and then everything else is demos, meaning that we can do whatever we want. If you have a question, if there's something that you want to compute, if there's something that you find interesting, just ask, and we can play with DAX together trying to solve problems. Okay? We do have a script, but I'm Italian. I'm not used to do things always the same way. I find them boring, so it's much better if we make it interactive. Make sense? And the second important thing, being Italian, I'm totally used to rude people. So do not be polite, like raising your hand and waiting for permission to talk. You will die for starvation if you do that. If you have a question, just ask. You can interrupt me at any time. Doesn't bother me. It makes everything more conversational. Make sense? Say yes, move your head. That helps a lot. Great. I'm Alberto Ferrari. I do a lot of things, all DAX related. Work with Marco Russo at SQLBI.com. We wrote the definite guide to DAX. And we do mainly training. We write articles, blog posts, and stuff. All about DAX and Tabular. But I'm not here to talk about myself. I'm here to talk about time intelligence. Time intelligence is an interesting topic, at least because every model, whatever you do, time is always there. And time intelligence is just a fancy name to say when time is the dimension, we do have some issues, we do have some problems to cover and to worry about. And there are a lot of calculations, year to date, quarter to date, running totals. There are a lot of calculations that you can do which are all related to time. And at least in my experience, when it's time to talk about time is where the creativity of users reaches the highest level. They want to compute fancy numbers or really complex ones. And that's why talking about time intelligence is interesting. There is a simple way to create calculation with time. You probably already all know how to do that. A simple year to date, for example, you have function that solve the problem. The thing is, things get a bit more tricky if you are concerned to two other different topics. One is calculation for which you do not have any predefined function. They become much harder because if you didn't learn the right way, then you don't know how to solve the problem. And then performance. Time intelligence functions are, well, just okay. They work, but they tend to run queries which are extremely slow. So learning how to write time intelligence calculation without using time intelligence function is important for performance tool, because you have the option of writing the code your own way and drive the optimizer to make faster code. Okay? As I told you, that's the last slide we are going to see. There are slides in the deck that you will probably be able to download on the website, but I find them boring, so I don't like to project everything with slides. First of all, you can slice by time, even though you do not have any date dimension in your model. Let me just look at the model as we have it right now. We have a fact table, sales, then we have a couple of dimensions, customers and product, and finally the receipts table. Sales and receipts are just sales. It's only that sales are sales to a customer and receipts are sales that happen in a shop where you have no idea who the customer was. He just entered in the shop, buy something, but we do not track who this guy is. That's why we have two different tables. Sales that has a relationship with customer and receipts that doesn't have any relationship with customer. Now, the first slide that I was about to project was saying that if you want to do any kind of time intelligence in Power BI, you need a date table. If you don't have a date table, you cannot slice by any attribute. You have no option of computing time intelligence. This is not entirely true because if we take a look at sales, where's my sales table here? Well, that's a bit too large. We have a lot of columns in sales, but we have the order date, we have the delivery date, and that's it. We do not have any other column. We do not have a year, a quarter, a month, nothing at all. Despite that, if you add the data column, let's get rid and add it again, the date column to the matrix, you are able to slice by year, quarter, month, and finally day. This happens because Power BI believes he's very smart and says, well, you don't have any date table in your model, so I'm going to create one for you. And because I'm really smart, I'm going to do it the wrong way. So you will be in trouble quite soon. Indeed, the engine decided that because you don't have a date dimension, it created one for us, for you. Even though you don't see it, these tables are shy, they do not show anywhere. But if you launch DAX Studio or any tool that is able to connect with your model, you will see that there are multiple tables which are hidden. Here they are, date table template, and then local date table, local date table. There are 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, different date tables, each of which contains a hierarchy, year, quarter, month, and day, which is exactly the hierarchy that we are seeing in the matrix. Not this one. I'm messing up everything. Okay, these are exactly the hierarchy that you see here. This is called auto date time. It's one of the worst features in Power BI because it basically does a date table for you, but it does it the wrong way. Have you seen that we have 5 different date dimensions? It didn't create only one, it created 5 dimensions. And it did it by scanning all of your columns, and as soon as it finds a date, it says, oh, you need a date dimension for that date, one for the order date, one for the delivery date, and you get one dimension for every single date. The drawbacks of this solution is that first, you have no control. If you don't like QTR1 and you want Q1, for example, that's not an option. You cannot change it because the table is hidden and there's no way to change it. But worse, if I want to see the sales amount and at the same time the receipts amount, it doesn't work. Why that? Because there is a table that is linked to the order date and another table that is linked to the receipt date. The 2 tables are not linked in any way, so you do have a time dimension, but that slices only one table at a time. That's not the right way to build a model. There's only one date, so you should have only one dimension for the date. Power BI creates a lot of them. So the best thing that you can do is go to File Options and disable this feature. If you go to Data Load, don't ask me why it is under Data Load, but there is this Time Intelligence Auto Date Time. You disable it, and all the date dimension will disappear. And while you are there, if you go to Data Load to Global, you have the option of disable auto date time for new files. You just keep it disabled, meaning that Power BI will never create date tables for you. Now, it no longer works, of course, because I no longer have a date dimension. But if you look at DAX Studio, now you see that we only have our tables. And Power BI stops messing around with our model. I don't hear. Is the microphone working? Because I don't hear him.
Is it? Yes.
Oh, now it's working.
Okay, that's good. Cool. With the auto date time, if you disable it, what happens when your Power BI desktop next release comes out? Is it re-enabled, or does it...
Sorry, when the Power BI desktop?
When you disable the auto time intelligence as default, when you get the next monthly release of Power BI desktop, is it re-enabled, or would it stay disabled? Or, I don't know, which is a perfectly acceptable answer.
That should remain disabled once and forever.
Right.
Especially the one that says, never bother me again.
Okay.
I mean, that was a heavy fight. Because first, auto date time, as soon as I saw it, I said, no, that's the wrong way to do that. And we fought to disable it, and we fought even harder to have a flag that says, never again. Don't do that anymore. Now, I have no idea what I was talking about. Anybody remembers? No, I just start from scratch. So we now have, we can slice by individual dates. We can no longer slice by year, month, and quarter because we no longer have a date. If you want a date dimension, or if you want to work anything about dates, you need a date table. If you don't have a date table, you are in trouble. You cannot use any time intelligence calculation because all time intelligence relies on the existence of this date table. That needs to have some properties. All the dates need to be there. I don't mind if you start selling in July, the 1st of January of that year needs to be there. And even though you stop selling on October, that doesn't mind, the 31st of December of that year needs to be there. So all the dates from the 1st of January to the 31st of December of all the years that you are referencing with your fact table. If you use as fiscal calendar, all the dates from the beginning of the end of the fiscal calendar, but all the dates need to be there with no holes. And you can create the date dimension in many ways. You can use M code, our scripts that generate the date dimension in M. You can use SQL, you can use DAX. We are going to use DAX. Or you can use Bravo. Bravo is a tool that we created. Do you know what Bravo is? So few people. Oh, so sorry for you. If you use Bravo that you need to install from the SQL BI website, you can launch it. It has a lot of useful features to show you the columns that are there to format your DAX code. But the feature that we are going to use very, very quickly, because that's time intelligence for dummies and we want to go deeper than that, you have the option of going to time intelligence and create the table that you want. You can use a standard time intelligence or fiscal calendar or monthly calendar or a custom time intelligence. We go for a standard one. That shows you how the table will be created. It will contain a date, the year quarter, and month, and does it by creating DAX code. And you also have the option of enabling time intelligence function. Like, hey, I want to create a time intelligence calculation for all the measures. Then you click on Preview Changes. It shows a button a window that shows function, dates, holidays, and stuff. I'm not interested in the details. Just click on Apply Changes, and that's it. Now we have in our model a date dimension that has been created here. It still does not have relationship with the model. What Bravo does not do is create relationship, but apart from that, it does a good job. So I can link, for example, the date where it is with says order date. Then I get rid of this order date. I slice by year. Let's use the hierarchy. I build the relation. Oh, no, I have the receipts amount, sorry. I forgot to create the relationship with receipts where we have a date that we link with the date. And that's it. It works. We have a data and everything is fine. If you need to use any time intelligence calculation, the Bravo engine created for you the totals, for example, of the receipts amount. I need to
Alberto?
review. Yes?
Question. Is there any performance benefit doing it in DAX versus doing it in M or doing it in SQL?
I need you to speak a bit louder.
Is there any performance benefit doing it in DAX versus doing it in M or doing it even back in SQL?
No, not at all. They work absolutely the same way. I like to do that in DAX just because I like DAX. If you do that in M, that's absolutely fine. The only slightly difference might be that if you do that in M, and you create it on the fly, so you don't have a table already in SQL, that means you need to search for the first and the last date of sales in the SQL table. That might take a bit longer, because you need to search in a SQL table instead of doing that in DAX. But really, there are no advantages or disadvantages. Once a table is computed and stored in Vertipack, it doesn't really matter from where the table comes from. It's there and can be used safely. Okay? So the engine Bravo created for us all the time intelligence calculations. You have the month to date, the quarter to date, the year to date, and the code is also pretty good. It computes everything for you. So if you want the year to date, you place it there, it computes a value, and that's it. And at this point, the session is finished. You know how to do that, and there's no more anything to learn. But the thing is, using Bravo to compute this calculation is absolutely meaningful, because it writes code for you, but the problem is we need to understand it a bit better. Because whatever Bravo does, whatever a tool does for you, if you need to change the code, you need to know how it works and understand exactly what happens under the hood. So even though Bravo is very cool and very nice, what we are going to do is go back, get rid of the time intelligence function, preview the changes. Oh, actually, we can do something better. Well, we apply the changes, so now we no longer have all the time intelligence calculation, and we are on our own. The goal is we are going to create the calculation by ourselves And that's it. You can use, again, Bravo to build the date table. I'm probably going to use the table of Bravo because it's pretty good. And creating a date table by ourselves is not so interesting. Mostly, if you build a model, you are likely to have, no, actually no, I'm lying. It's better if we create everything by ourselves so we can change everything. So let me go here and get rid also of the date dimension, which I cannot do from Bravo, so we kill it from here. Let's kill the date dimension, and we create one. So we write a bit of DAX code together. So if I need a date dimension, we can just create one in DAX, or in M or whatever. Where's new table? Here. There's a function that does everything for us, which is calendar auto. Calendar auto scans for your model for any column that contains a date and generates a table containing dates. So it starts from 1910 because it scans all the columns. And among all the columns that contain a date, we also have the birth date. So we have customers that were born in 1910. That's the reason why it starts in 1910. If you plan to use calendar auto, you also always need to filter out the dates that are not interested for you. So like we filter out of calendar auto. What's happening here? Okay, out of calendar auto, all the rows where the year of the date is greater or equal than the year of the minimum sales order date. So that generates only dates after the first sale, and we get rid of all the dates before 1910, before 2007. And this is already an important aspect to cover, because now we do have a performance issue. The date dimension, as we are going to see, is the main table that is scanned every time you do any kind of calculation with date and time. So you need to keep it as small as possible. Making it larger than required means that every time you want to perform a calculation, it will need to scan a lot of years. And keep in mind, it does not matter whether you have only 5 years of sales. If you have a date dimension of 100 years, the engine will always compute 100 years, only to discover that for 95 years there is no data. But that time is wasted, and you are just wasting time, money, and CPU power computing dates that do not exist. So we need to keep this table as small as possible. And then, of course, we need to add some columns to make it interesting to browse. We can add the year by just extracting the year of the date, and then the month by taking format the date as month, and then we also want the month number by taking the month of the date. Then this O needs to be lowercase, and that's it. Then we need to build a set of relationships. Let me kill, this is the code, by the way, that Bravo generates for you. It's interesting to study if you want. Let's get rid of this and this table. These are all tables auto-generated by Bravo that we are no longer interested in seeing. So we create a relationship between order date and date, and also between receipts and date, as we did before. And then we take from the data, we just place the year. I don't want to, this is the new UI. Let me see how it works. Have you tried that? Okay, it works. You can slice by year and also by month. And of course, we need to sort the month by month number, otherwise it doesn't show the data correctly. And that's it. It works and produces a nice result. I can now slice by year and quarter. But we are here to learn about time intelligence, so we're not here just to learn about building a date dimension. Time intelligence means computing calculations on top of the time. So for example, we might want to compute a YTD, the year to date. Now, how are we expected to compute the year to date, for example, of April? How would you compute the year to date of April? Much louder than that? Yeah, of course, computing year to date means from January to April or to May or to whatever, but how? How would you write the DAX code? What is the idea behind that?
Take the part of the date dimension and calculate.
The microphone is yours.
Yeah, so I would take that part of the date and calculate it, the sum of.
And how would you
sales.
take that part of the date?
I could use date add.
Date add?
No, date, sorry.
Don't be shy. I mean, keep in mind, you are the only one answering, so everybody else is not helping you.
You could use date add by taking the date of April, working out 4 months before it, so date add minus 4 months, then collect the values from that, and then aggregate them. So that would have to do with date add. It is complex, yes, but you could use date add to do so, yeah.
But he's there saying, oh, come on, we have a better option.
Check the current max year in its current context, then remove the context, and refilter for the whole year context.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So, you know what a
Previous.
filter context is? Say yes or say no, but you know what a filter context is?
Yes.
Cool. So we have a filter context in May, and here the filter context says just May. If I want to compute the sum of all the values from January to May, what I need to do is change the filter context and say, hey, I'm not interested only in May. I want all the dates in the current year starting from the 1st of January to the end of May. Make sense? So you change the filter context and that's it, it works. We have specific functions that do that. So we could use total YTD, for example. You can write the sales of YTD by using total YTD. Bit larger, total YTD of date of sales amount using the date column. And that works like magic. You don't need to do anything. You place it here and ta-da! Yeah, I need to get rid of the receipts amount, otherwise the numbers are impossible to read. You see, it works. But again, total weighted is just syntax sugar for a much more complex expression that we need to understand. So we are not going to use this, we are going to write the code from scratch. What we want to obtain is change the filter context, and instead of showing only 1 month, extend it in order to see all the periods from the beginning of the year up to the end of the current period. How do we compute the end of the current period? Let's create a variable, end of current period. Why end of month? Yeah, max is just simpler. If you are on the 15th of January, you don't want the end of month. You just got the max of the date. Now, whenever we write code, what I like to do is always return variables while I'm writing them, so that it shows the result directly in the matrix. And now it's showing that my measure is returning the 31st of January, 28th of February, 31st of March. So it's computing the correct number. Then I need to compute the first of the year. First of current year. How can I compute the first of the current year? There is. I don't know. If there is, I don't know. Yeah, there is start of year, but that's a completely different function. Much louder than that. I don't hear you. That's something that I forgot to mention. Becoming older, my ears simply do not work as they were working at the beginning. So you need to talk me.
Yeah, so we could use the date and the year of the max date and use the 1st of January.
We just take the year of the end of the current period and then 1st of January. And if we made it correctly, this is the first of the current year. And that shows the 1st of January 2007, and then changes to the 1st of January 2008 for 2008. And now we can compute the result. How? We're going straight for the result. Calculate. Okay, we compute the sales amount, and then we can just write something like filter the date, where the day date is greater or equal than the first of the current year, and at the same time it happens that the day date is less or equal than the end of the current period. Make sense? And then I have my result. I can copy it here, place it in the report, format it as a decimal number, to discover that it's not working. I know you know it. I want to hear everybody say, of course it's not working. Why?
You need to remove the filter.
How? Which filter and how?
Filter on the date. You need to...
When we are here in May, we do have a filter that says for the month I'm only interested in May, and for the year I'm only interested in 2007. What we are doing with our filter, I lost my measure. We are not removing the filter, but why are we not? I mean, I filter date, and this filters all the columns in date, including the month and including the year. So that should override the filter on May. Why is it not removing it? Okay, because actually that filter is being used here. This calculation is computed for May, and when I reference filter date, that's only May. So it's filtering out of May, only May. And if I do filter all date, now this is going to work, and that computes a nice year-to-date in a simple way. Make sense? Now that we've warmed up, this is, of course, a way to compute a YTD in a completely, in a way that does not use any time intelligence calculation. And it's important that you learn this technique, because you are probably never going to write code like this, but there are a lot of scenarios where time intelligence calculation are not enough, and you will need more power than what time intelligence calculation offers you. If that is the case, you need to be able to write code like this and understand exactly how it works, because otherwise you are in trouble and you cannot force the engine to do what you want. We're going to see an example quite soon.
Is there a difference in performance on the one you just wrote versus the total year-to-date?
Between this version and total YTD, no. Because this version actually filters at the date level, okay?
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, yes. Is there any performance difference between this version and the one that we wrote before with total YTD? And the answer is no. In this specific case, the code that I wrote is absolutely identical, because the calculation we do works at the date level. Generically speaking, you are quite always able to write code that is faster than the time intelligence calculation. Time intelligence calculation have a very strong limitation that they work at the day level, always. When you create a YTD, or when you create, for example, the same period last year, you might be showing just the year and the month, but still the calculation happens at the day level internally, because all the calculation, if you use time intelligence calculation, happens at the day level. Now, in Vertipack, this is not a big problem, because Vertipack is fast enough, but if you use direct query, that means the SQL code that is sent retrieves data at the day level, and that is slower to generate, slower to process. So writing your own code is quite always a better option.
You need to do it this way to do like custom periods, so like you've got fiscal years.
I need also you to talk louder.
Do you need to do this kind of method for when you've got custom periods like fiscal periods or 445 calendars?
Yeah, that's important to note. You need to do this whenever you have custom period, or for example, you work with weeks, or you have a specific fiscal calendar. All time intelligence calculation, they work with a regular Gregorian calendar with 12 months. But with time, there are people that use 13 months. There are people that use different calendars. There are people that work with weeks. That makes total sense, but weeks are not supported at all by all-time intelligence calculation. So you will need to write the code by yourself, paying attention to a lot of details. If you are bored by writing this code all the time, of course you make it simpler. So for example, this filter can be expressed in a much better way by using dates between. Dates between. So that you don't need to specify all these details. You just use dates between, date, and then you specify the beginning, the first, and the last of the boundaries of the period you are interested in slicing. Oh, these buttons are beautiful. They stay here while I edit my DAX code. Yes?
Inclusive or exclusive? Because if it's between,
including the first and including also the last one.
Okay, thank you.
I really love these buttons. Okay. So writing them with says YTD is so with dates between. That's simpler. You don't have to write filter, and you don't have to worry about a lot of details. And because writing this code is kind of boring, it works, but again, it's boring. It forces you to compute the first and the last period. We have a beautiful function that does everything for us, which is dates YTD over date, and that's it. So you can get rid of all the code that we wrote, and the entire time intelligence calculation is just this one. Calculate sales amount, dates YTD, and it works. What does this code do? Exactly the very same thing that we did with filter. It returns a table that contains all the dates that starts from the beginning of the year and reach the end of the year, reach the end of the current period. Everything is done automatically by the engine. Make sense? Still, I'd like somebody to tell me how is this code working? Because if you think about that, it shouldn't. A bit smaller, okay. What is happening, for example, in April? What is the filter context in April? It's not just April. You want to be, I want.
Of 2007.
You can be even more precise than that. We actually don't have one filter. We are in April. What is the filter context here? Really precise and pedantic as I love you to be?
Every day?
No?
1st of April to the end of it?
No. You're still missing the important point, and that's why I'm waiting.
Year 2007 and month April?
That is correct. Year 2007, month April. We have two filters, one on the year, 2007, one on the month that happen to show April, so that together the two filters on two separate columns, they filter the month of April. Make sense? That is important because these are two filters on two columns. We call them year and month, but they could be whatever. The engine doesn't know what is the year and what is the month. We do not have a filter over one specific month. It's only the intersection of two columns that generates a month filter. Was that a question?
Is the month number included in the context?
I really need you to cry out loud.
Is the month number included in the context because that's using the result to do the sorting?
If anybody heard it, they need to repeat it because I really couldn't.
Is the month number included in the context because
Yes.
that's included in the sorting of
Is the month number?
name?
Yes, because the month number is part of the sorting. Therefore, the query that is generated includes both the month name and the month number. Okay? So you are right. It's 3 columns, actually, because of the sort by column. However, now that we know that, if we write down the filter context here, we say, okay, so we have for the year 2007, for the month, we have April. And then calculate wakes up and says, oh, I'm going to change the filter context. I'm going to compute the sales amount. And I'm going to do that in a new filter context that is modified by dates.ytd. Now, what does dates.ytd returns? Dates.ytd returns a table that contains how many columns? It's written there. One, the date. So, is the filter over date going to change the filter context? We had a filter on the year, we have a filter on the month. Why should we change either the filter on the month or the filter on the year? We are not messing up with the columns that are already filtered. We are adding another filter. So the final filter context would be something like 2007, month equal April, and all dates from January 1st to April. That should be the new filter context that is created. So how comes that it's working? If that was the case, that the intersection of all these filters would lead to show only April. Instead, it's showing all the dates. And the reason is another behavior that Power BI generates in order to simplify the life of developers. And again, another behavior that is very well hidden. If, and only in the case, if a relationship between two dates, two tables, is based on a column that is a date, and in the filter context, you make a change to the filter context, changing the column that is the key of the relationship. If these two conditions are true, then the engine automatically removes any filter from the table before applying this new filter. And you can actually check this. If instead of, let's kill these relationships, but this and this, let me add a new column to the table that is the date key. Date key that contains the year of the date times 10,000 plus the month of the date. Times 100. I'm just building a date key with using the standard date, the standard format. Where am I? I messed up something. Yes, this parenthesis is not needed. So now I have a date key in my date table. And because I do have a date key also in sales, we have the order date key. I can base the relationship on that integer instead of using the date. So I take the sales date, no, the order date key. Where is it? Order date key. I link to the date key in the date dimension. Now the relationship between the two tables is no longer based on a date. Therefore, this all doesn't work. And look at what happens to my sales YTD. As expected, it doesn't work. So it was not expected to work, not even before. But because of this magic behavior of Power BI, all-time intelligence calculation work even though they shouldn't. If you want to make this work, what you need to do is add manually an all over the date in order to force to remove the filter before you apply this new filter. Okay? Or you leave it as it is, but because it's based on an integer, you do an option that a lot of people do without even knowing what it does, which is you go on the date table and you mark it as a date table. If you mark a table as a date table, you need to provide a column, in this case, the date. And this column tells the engine, hey, when I will change the filter on this specific column, that is when you need to add all to the table because it means I'm using a time intelligence calculation. Okay? And by clicking OK, it wasn't working and now it's working again. So mark as a date table is a feature that is designed specifically for the scenario where you have a date dimension, you link it to the sales table, and the relationship between the two is not based on a date, but it's based on an integer. or whatever other data types. If it is a date, everything works automatically. But this has consequences. It doesn't come for free. Because if I mark a table as a date table, that means all is always added to the model, to any calculation. So let's keep our YTD, and let's add another column to our date dimension. Let's say that I'm interested in the weekday. And I use a format of the date. I think this is the right one. Yes. And then the weekday number. No, actually, we don't need it. We don't have time to do everything. Just let's use the weekday. It will be sorted wrong, but who cares? And now let's pretend that I use the weekday and I create a slicer out of it. Now, I would love to see how to make it a slicer, but I don't. Do you know how to do that? There's no... Where's the drop down? At the very top. Oh, this one. Cool. And where on earth is the slicer? Here it is. Okay, no. It didn't work. Now, I probably not really smart, but yes, so let's do that this way. Oh, don't worry, it's fine. I create the slicer and then I add the weekday to it. I love to use new features during a demo. Okay, now, what is going to happen? Let's pretend that I want the YTD, but I want the YTD considering only working days. So I'm not interested in Saturday and Sundays, only Monday to Friday. Make sense? I can do that. I just need to select Friday, Monday, no Saturday, no Sunday, Thursday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And the first question for you is it working? No. The numbers are strange. How comes that I have 794 here? Why do I have this number? This is not the sum of these two numbers. We can make it even more evident. Let's pretend that I'm only interested in Mondays. So I select only Monday, and this is even worse. We see only 62,000 for January, which makes sense, but we see 762,000 for the YTD. Why? No, it's not because I get all Mondays, because when I look at the code, which I would love to see, let's get rid of this format. Let's go back to the measure sales YTD. Let's spend a few seconds. No, sales YTD. Let's go on here, for example. The filter context here, now it's a bit different. It's 2007, April, and Mondays. Here it will be 2007, April, Mondays, and all dates. No, that's not what's going to happen. Because our dates YTD, because it changes the filter on a column that is marked as a date column, it happens that we have all on the dates. That kills all the filters on the date table, including the one on Monday. So what you get as a result is that all dates from January 1st to April, because also the filter on Monday gets killed by our dates YTD. Make sense? So how to fix that? Well, in this very specific case, you can use values of date weekday in order to restore the filter on the weekday, and you obtain a YTD that actually works.
When you added weekdays, the value has changed, I suppose.
I really don't understand. When I add value of weekdays,
Yeah, when you added the slicer, the values, the YTD should stay the same, right?
when I added the slicer, if I didn't add that values, the value was wrong. So if you get rid of this, the value of the sales amount is still the same because that includes the Monday. So the filter on Monday is working here for the sales amount. And what I'm showing here is the sales amount of Mondays.
No, on the year to date. If you add now Saturday, for example.
If I add values, then of course it's going to change because right now the YTD, so what you are seeing here is not taking into account the Mondays. It's taking into account all the dates. If I add values, then the number will be consistent with what I show here, so that is the sum of the values which are here. So the behavior of time intelligence calculation is designed to make it simple for users to build simple time intelligence calculation. But then there are some traps which are important. Learning how to use them is quite important because it gives you a lot of power. Of course, I'm focusing now only on dates YTD. There are a ton of time intelligence functions that you can use and mix together to build more important calculations. But you asked for the hard version, so I went straight to the problems instead of talking about the things that work. Time intelligence calculations are powerful, they are good, they are working perfectly, but they have these two limitations. The first one is that they are designed to be simple, and they add this all to the table that mostly works unless you have a specific problem or you want to keep some filters. If you want to keep some filters, you need to be aware that if the relationship is based on a date, that all is added automatically. If you mark it as a date table, again, that all is added automatically. Either you don't mark it as a date table, and then you need all to add all whenever you want it. Don't add all if you don't want. Or you write the code paying attention to these small details. And the other reason why it is extremely important to spend time learning how to compute time intelligence calculation, as we did before, without using time intelligence calculation, is because in most scenarios, and I really mean like 90% of the models that I see, the date dimension is just uselessly large. You always, when it's time to talk about time, you always need to ask yourself what is the granularity that is actually required by the users. How many of your users build reports at the day level? Mostly, you have a day dimension at the day level, but then users are not interested, they just go at the month level. Now, if the user go at the month level, what's the point in having a dimension that contains 365 rows per year when you can have a dimension that contains only 12 rows per year? And it makes total sense to build a day dimension that is not the day dimension. It only contains 12 rows per year. That means 120 rows for 10 years. That reduces dramatically the size of the day dimension. And doing that speeds up all of your calculation by a lot. But if you go for that path, that means no time intelligence calculation function will work. You will need to write the code by yourself because that's the only option that remains available to you. But trust me, the speed of the model is going to increase dramatically because you are reducing the size of the table. All the columns will be smaller, the calculation will be faster, and life will be way, way better for everybody. Still, I don't know why, but I always see people building date dimension that contains 1 row per date, even though users are not interested at all. Okay, so think about that. And that's the reason why in Bravo and in DAXpatterns.com, now I think I finished my time, right? Okay, so you didn't show me 5 minutes. That's the reason why in the DAXpatterns.com website, we show different patterns for week calculation, for different type of calculation, but the one that I love the most is the one at the month, with the monthly calendar. That does not use any time intelligence calculation, it does everything at the month level. That generates a very small table. It's very simple to do any sort of calculation. Yes, you need to write code, not this way, because dates YTD will not work. You need to use filter, all, you need to write all those pieces of code. Luckily, if you want to write that code by instead of writing it by yourself, you want to have it auto-generated, Bravo does a lot of work for you. So I don't want you to use tools like Bravo or any other tool that automatically generates code, like ChatGPT, for example. Trust in that code and say, hey, it works, I'm happy. That would be totally wrong. Rather, if you use the tool to auto-generate code and then you spend time understanding exactly what it does and you have the capability of changing it, then that makes a lot of sense because you see code that has been generated nicely, you understand how it works, and then you have the option of changing it later. Okay? Then we have a lot of slides that are extremely interesting, but we go straight at the last one, where I thank you for attending the session. I hope you liked it. If you have any sort of question, you can meet me here. Next, there is an Ask Me Anything session in the auditorium that was organized by Prati and the London user groups, where we can chat about whatever you like, DAX related or whatever you prefer. Thank you for attending, and hope to see you soon.